Today, I'll be diving into a hot topic that's on the minds of many international students in Canada. That is, how can you extend your stay after graduation? With the recent changes in the Canadian immigration policies and the growing competition for permanent residency, it feels overwhelming trying to figure out the best path forward. But don't worry, extending your stay in Canada is definitely achievable. In this video, I'll be sharing with you 3 practical and legal options for international students to continue their journey in Canada. So if you are ready to turn your Canadian dream into a long-term reality, then stay tuned. Before we dive in, I always say that make sure to consider your permanent residency goals when choosing the right option for you. The first option that we'll be talking about will be extending your study status, and this applies to people who are planning to study or are currently still in school. As a student who has finished, let's say, a 1-year course, you can apply for a second course or a degree to extend your study status. Most people coming into Canada now will either be targeting a 1-year course due to financial reasons or other reasons. But if that applies to you, after studying that 1-year course, there's an option to either extend your stay by applying for a second course to possibly extend your study status. This is because completing a 1-year program will only get you a 1-year PGWP, that's a postgraduate work permit, which allows you to work in Canada for 1 year. And because you can get the PGWP only once in your lifetime, you will want to take a full advantage of it. Even though I have seen people who have studied a 1-year program get a 3-year PGWP, you wouldn't want to take that risk with yourself if your plans or the pathway that you plan to use to get to PR currently is not a viable option. You might want to possibly go and study another 1-year program to possibly extend your stay. So in this case, what I'm advising you to do possibly in such a scenario is you avoid claiming your PGWP, to which you are entitled to after graduation. Then now you can have the option of possibly applying for a second program. Basically, you stack a 1-year program on top of another 1-year program, and by so doing, that qualifies you to now get a much longer PGWP. That's a 3-year instead of a 1-year. Usually a 1-year program gets you a 1-year PGWP, and a 2-year program gets you a 3-year PGWP. So for people who are studying for 2 years or more, they know that they are going to get a 3-year PGWP. So if their course is 2 years, they know that at least they have a 5-year window possibly to get to PR before they either go out of status. If they are studying an undergraduate program, which is 4 years, they know that after that 4-year program, they are going to get a 3-year postgraduate work permit. So if you are going for a 1-year program, you can start putting in place a strategy possibly to start a second program post-graduation if you don't have a clear pathway to PR. Or before you even apply, my advice is you can possibly go for a master's program, which will not only help you extend your stay, but it will also get you more points for permanent residency through the dedicated PMP programs, such as those who are in Ontario. They can go through maybe the Ontario Master's Graduate Stream or even in the Express Entry Stream. So if you have not actually picked your program, it will be good to now make a decision whether to go for a 1-year program, a 2-year program, or even a master's program. Whichever option that you go for, it will have its own pros and cons, so it will be important to now make the necessary assessment. Also, do take into account the new PGWP eligibility requirements that the Canadian Immigration Department introduced as of May 15th, 2024. So it is important to now make sure you have a full understanding of that requirement, so that any program that you are going for, you know what it entails and how that will qualify you for PGWP. So after getting the admission to that program, be it another 1-year program, you can now take the step to extend your stay, which you will do by applying for a study permit extension based on the new program offer letter that you received at least 30 days before your existing study permit expires. And this is key here. You need to make sure that you submit the application at least 30 days before your existing study permit expires, else you will end up going out of status. And most times when it comes to study permit extension, the approval process is much more smoother and straightforward than a normal application, because you are already in Canada and they have all the information they need about you. So it makes the extension process much more faster. And when you get that study permit extension, it is important that you renew all your social insurance number and health insurance with the new study permit extension that you've gotten, because your social insurance numbers will be tied to your old study permits, which will end up expiring. So the tips that I will leave you when it comes to this particular one is, first, make sure you apply for your extension at least 30 days before your current study permit expires. Secondly, don't forget to renew your social insurance and health insurance if that applies to you. And thirdly, make sure you are aware of the new requirements as at 15th May 2024 when it comes to PGWP. The second group that we will look at are basically students who are already on the PGWP, that is expiring. So in this case, let's say you are a student who studied a 1-year program, you went ahead to apply for your PGWP and you got a 1-year PGWP, and that one is about to expire. What kind of strategy can you go forward with? I would say that if you are international students who is already on the PGWP that is expiring soon and not having enough points to meet the prevailing permanent residency scores, you can extend your stay based on a new study program. So in this case, you are on a PGWP which is about to expire. Instead of waiting to go out of status, you can now switch from a PGWP back to international students. That is, you apply to another school to get admission so that you can get another study permit. But you have to be mindful of this one, that because you've already gotten the PGWP, even after studying on this new program, you cannot apply to get another PGWP. But the good thing here is you can now extend your stay in Canada with that new admission. But in this case, what I would advise is, this time, make sure you choose a study program that can lead you to in-demand occupation for permanent residency, or the one that can lead you to boost your existing score when it comes to permanent residency. So because maybe after 1 year you got a 1-year PGWP, you basically have a better understanding of the system now. So pick a course that possibly are in demand, which will make it easy and make you more competitive when it comes to the permanent residency scoring system. However, if you are someone who don't want to return to study status, you can apply for a closed work permit, which calls for a job offer and a positive labor market impact assessment from a Canadian employer. So in this case, what you are going to do is now look for an employer who is prepared to offer you that closed work permit and be able to give you that LMIA to be able to now apply for a closed work permit and continue staying in Canada. However, this can be a difficult option since not every student can get a job offer, either by not finding a job matching their skill or by employers not willing to support their immigration status, because it might be difficult to find an employer who is prepared to possibly support your immigration application through the LMIA process. Also, it can tend to be quite an expensive option since there are a lot of employers who are illegally charging, let's say, a hefty price to give LMIA. So in most cases, you realize that sometimes the amount that you might have to pay to get that LMIA, it might be even be higher than possibly applying to another school, or it might be higher than the cost of tuition for another program. So instead of now going to spend that hefty amount just to get somebody to sponsor you through that process, my advice is you can consider possibly the school option where you go back to school, which might be an easier option for you. The third option that I will speak about is possibly extending your stay as a visitor. Most visitor visas that are given will be valid for up to 10 years or up to the expiration of your passport, which lets you stay in Canada for at least 6 months at a time. So even though they've issued you the visa for a 10-year period, you know that you can continue staying in Canada at least 6 months at a time. But another option that you can extend your stay as visitor beyond 6 months limit is by applying for extension via the visitor record. So in this case, you are not applying for a new visitor visa. You are applying for extension via visitor record. Those are two different things. I have made that mistake where at some point I was applying for a visitor visa and I ended up applying for a visitor record. So it's important to now know the difference and know how each one applies to you. I will make sure to break up the difference for you to know subsequently. However, one thing you should know is visitors are not allowed to work legally in Canada. And if you work on cash, then such an experience cannot be counted towards any of your permanent residency programs. Some visitors also use this option where they do apply to get a US B1, B2 visa, exit Canada for 24 hours because let's say they're on a visitor visa, they go into US for 24 hours, then they will return back into Canada and stay for another 6 months. So basically they are on a visitor visa, and what they will do is because they have a US visa, they will exit Canada for 24 hours and come back and stay for another 6 months. So basically every 6 months they will just exit and come back in without having to break any rule. And this is a good way to also extend your stay in Canada. This is a workaround to apply for an extension, but it is legal way of living in Canada again for up to another 6 months. The only constraint here is after every 6 months you have to exit the country and come back in for the 6 months to start all over again. So now let's look at the difference between a visitor visa and a visitor record, so that you don't make that mistake that I made in the past where instead of applying for a visitor visa, I end up applying for a visitor record. In your case, because we are talking about extension, you might need a visitor record. So it wouldn't make sense to go and apply for a visitor visa. While these two may seem similar, the visitor visa and the visitor record serve different purposes and they are issued under different circumstances. So now let's look at what set them apart and how they can affect your stay in Canada. First one that we'll look at will be the visitor visa. That's a temporary residency visa, a TRV. The purpose of the visitor visa is an official document issued by the Canadian Visa Office that permits you to enter Canada as a visitor. Most times when it comes to the entry requirements, this is essential for specific countries to enter Canada. So it doesn't apply to most other countries that have an understanding of Canada where you can come in and don't require a visa. And when it comes to validity, you can be issued a single entry, multiple entry, allowing you to enter Canada based on the number of entries that you were given. And when it comes to the application process, most times this particular visa is obtained before you travel to Canada, and it's usually stamped in your passport. And the duration upon entry, you have the CBSA officers typically who decide how long you can stay. So depending on the CBSA officer you interact with, they will decide that, oh, I'm allowing you to stay maybe a month or 2 or 3. But most times if they don't tell you how long you are supposed to stay, you are allowed to stay up to 6 months, and after 6 months you have to exit the country. And when it comes to renewal, you cannot renew a visitor visa from within Canada. If you need to extend your stay, you will be required to apply for a visitor record. So if you enter the country with your visitor visa and you need to renew it, most times they will advise you to apply for a visitor record and not another visitor visa from within the country. So now let's look at the visitor record. The purpose of a visitor record allows you to extend your stay or change the conditions of your stay in Canada as a visitor. So this particular one is always issued to people who are already in Canada. So you can't get a visitor record whilst you are outside the country. Most times it's issued to people who are already in Canada to either extend their stay or change their status. So you can have people who are on study permit who will say that, oh, I don't want to go to school again, I'm changing back to a visitor, and they will switch you back to visitor record. Or the person came in and wants to extend his stay as a visitor, they will ask you to apply for a visitor record. When it comes to entry requirement, there are no entry documents for this particular one. From my experience, when I applied for it, they will issue you a document. It shouldn't be a stamp in your passport. You cannot use the visitor record to enter Canada. It only modifies your stay in the country. So you cannot have a visitor record and say I'm exiting the country and come back. And when it comes to validity, based on the application, they will specify how long and any conditions that will apply to your stay when you are issued one. So most times they might issue you for up to a year to allow you to stay in Canada. So the key difference between these two is one allows you to enter the country and the other one actually allows you to change your status whilst you are in the country. And one of them you can only apply for from outside the country, and the other one you can apply only from within the country. So whether it's through work permits, further education, or visiting, there are multiple pathways to help you continue your journey in Canada. If, let's say, your PGWP or your study permit is about to expire, but this needs planning, and keep in mind your future permanent residency options. So whatever you are doing, I always say make sure you have a strategy and a pathway to get to permanent residency, so that you don't have to find yourself in limbo. If you got value out of this video, kindly hit the like button so that I know that you enjoyed this video. And also, if you haven't subscribed to this channel, kindly hit the subscribe button so that you can join this family as we learn together. And feel free to share this video with your loved ones who might find value in it. Until the next video, cheers.